Welcome back, everybody, to episode 48 of the Guardian Project podcast. I'm your host, Andy, and I'm starting to feel a bit like Emrakul. But instead of being imprisoned in the moon, I'm imprisoned in my house, and it's not Innistrad, it's the entire world.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. And I'm your co-host, Mike Coyle, and, I've been working out a lot lately, and I just feel like I keep getting into fights with Nahiri. Because I'm soaring all the wrong places.
No.
Please listen carefully.
I've been going on bike rides, and it's awful for like the first, for I guess bike ride like 2, 3, and 4.
Yeah.
Because you get really sore on that first bike ride, and those seats are not big enough. No. Even with bike shorts, even with those padded bike shorts, I love those.
I have never owned those. That sounds
really
wonderful.
They're just like your butt's a giant pad. It's really great.
And
they were like
what if
$12.
What if your butt's already a giant pad?
But you're putting pads on pads on pads. It's solid. And this is the podcast where we talk about all things Magic the Gathering.
But mostly Commander.
And before we start, we want to thank our patrons. We appreciate all of your support. If you want to support us, you can head to patreon.com/Guardian Project Podcast for any dollar amount. We've got lots of fun trinkets to give away, and we will have some patron-only content coming out soon. We are dabbling in some video Commander deck techs, so we're excited to release that soon.
Yeah, a couple other ways you can support the podcast. We do have a TCG player affiliate link located on our website, guardianprojectpodcast.com. If you're looking for any singles or sealed product, please use that link. The proceeds will go right back into the podcast and help us do some fun stuff. Also, if you could just subscribe, rate, review, leave a comment on any media that you are listening to our podcast on, we would greatly appreciate it.
What are we talking about this week?
This week, we actually had a suggestion from someone on our Discord to talk about some budget versions of expensive cards that are commonly played in EDH or Commander. I don't know why I say EDH. I never say EDH. I don't know why I said it today. And also we have a Commander of the Week. I will talk about actually my newest deck that I have built, my quarantine deck. Hogaak, the Arisen Necropolis.
And we have gameplay of Hogaak on our YouTube channel. But it's not like a YouTube/Guardian Project podcast because we don't have enough subscribers yet. So go check out our video and subscribe, because then we'll be able to get an actual link we can, just read instead of youtube.com/a strand of digits and letters and things that I cannot memorize.
We'll just come up with an acronym that is real catchy, that's 400 words long that people
Yes, that's a good idea. We should. I don't even know what it is. Honestly, I don't look at it anymore. But we've gotten a few subscribers, so we're hoping everybody likes our content. We've been recording all of our Paper Commander streams on Fridays, so go check that out. So let's talk about some real expensive cards that we have some budget versions of that you can either replace or add to make more redundant. I guess we do have a qualifier before we start this, though. So in most of these cases, these are not one-to-one replacements.
Right.
In some cases, they might be, but in the majority of these cases, they are not.
Right.
And many of these will be slower, may cost more mana, have some significant drawbacks, might benefit your opponents, which that could be good or bad, I guess, in your opinion. And this is not a comprehensive list. This is a list that we have put together based on cards that we would use as substitutions. So if there's things that we miss or things that you use that as a substitution that we don't go over, feel free to tweet at us at Guardian Pod. And tell us what your thoughts are. So we each picked 5. So why don't you go ahead with your first?
Sure. So let's do a really hard one right out of the bat. The first one I picked was the card Scroll Rack.
difficult to replace.
Yeah. So Scroll Rack's only been printed once. It was printed in Tempest. It's a 2-mana artifact, colorless artifact, that says you can pay 1 and tap it and choose any number of cards in your hand and set those cards aside. Put an equal number of cards from the top of your library into your hand, then put the cards set aside in this way on top of your library in any order. So typically, Scroll Rack is obviously, as a colorless card, it is used in a wide variety of decks and in a wide variety of situations. It is used for different things. So, like, I play Scroll Rack in my Ilharg, the Raise Board deck, because it's pseudo card draw. It doesn't actually give you card advantage, but it's nice to, get a fresh hand every once in a while. But what I wanted to focus on here for Scroll Rack was top deck manipulation. So manipulating the top of your library for effects such as God Eternal, Kefnet, Yuriko the Tiger's Shadow, that kind of stuff, where you really care what's right on top of your library. Now, there really isn't a permanent that you could put out there that will do this over and over and over again. We searched. I know, Andy, I know you looked at this card, so I'm sure you searched too.
It's so funny because when we were coming up with our list, I gave Coyle the 5 cards I was going over, and he goes, cool, I picked these. And when I saw him say Scroll Rack, I go, yeah, I spent about an hour on that and gave up. So yeah. I'm interested to see what you came up with, because I could not find a good enough replacement for that.
So a real non-budget replacement is called Jace the Mind Sculptor that has a brainstorm on his 0 ability for a planeswalker.
Sure.
But it's also in blue, so it's actually even more limiting than Scroll Rack itself. So going about that route, obviously we're not going to say Jace the Mind Sculptor. That isn't budget. There is a 2-mana artifact called Isochron Scepter out there. On TCG Player, looks like you can pick it up for under $10 for a card, versus the Scroll Rack, which is I think TCG low right now is about $50. TCG market price is $60, so depending on what condition you're looking for, again, only printed once in Tempest. You could probably find a damaged one for a pretty good price. But Isochron Scepter, 2-mana artifact with imprint. It says when it enters the battlefield, you can exile an instant with converted mana cost 2 or less from your hand. Pay 2, tap it, and copy the exiled card. If you do, you may cast a copy without paying its mana cost. This is kind of cheating in the way of replacing Scroll Rack, because we're going to replace it with 2 cards. We're going to replace it with Isochron Scepter and Brainstorm. So you tuck Brainstorm underneath your Isochron Scepter so you can continuously cast Brainstorm. It technically gives you card advantage because you're drawing 1 additional card, but you're taking cards from your hand and putting them back on top of your library. Another way you can Brainstorm, there is a creature called Riverwise Augur. This is an uncommon from Rivals of Ixalan. You could pick up for under a quarter from TCG Player. It is 3 and a blue, and when it enters the battlefield, you draw 3 cards, then put 2 cards from your hand on top of your library in any order. So if you have blink effects that can make it so that you continually do this every single turn, maybe you have like a Thassa Deep Dwelling, the new Theros Thassa that can blink something every turn, or a Conjurer's Closet out there. Again, this is a 2-card combo replacing Scroll Rack. Scroll Rack is a really good card in and of itself, one card combo. Cavalier of Gales is from M20, does a very similar thing. 2 blue, blue, blue. You get a 5/5 flyer. When it enters, you draw 3 and put 2 back. It does have the added effect of when it dies, you shuffle it into your library and you scry 2. So scrying is another way that you can manipulate the top of your library. But the other 2 cards I wanted to talk about is not so much manipulating the top of your library from your hands the way Scroll Rack does, but actually from the rest of your library. So you have a card called Limdol's Vault that you can pick up on TCG Player for under $5. It's blue and a black, and it's actually a super complicated card in my opinion. It is an instant speed. You look at the top 5 cards of your library as many times as you choose. You can pay 1 life, put those cards on the bottom, look at the next top 5. And you can do that as many times until you find 5 that you like. Then you put those 5 on top any way you want, reshuffle the rest of your deck, then you're good to go. This is a 2-mana instant that you can put under Isochron Scepter as well, so you can constantly do it. And then the last card I want to talk about is just a chef's kiss card I love. Insidious Dreams. For 3 and a black, it's an instant. So it's 4 mana, so you can't put this under Isochron Scepter, but it's a way you can filter your hand away in order to manipulate the top of your deck. As an additional cost to play Insidious Dreams, discard X cards from your hand, search your library for X cards, then shuffle your library and put those cards on top of it in any order. You can pick up an Insidious Dreams. This is a little bit pricey compared to the other cards we're talking about, but it is you can get it for under $12 for a copy.
So I didn't play Insidious Dreams until you told me about it, and I play that card. It's really great.
It's nuts.
I play that in my Lazav the Multifarious deck.
Mm-hmm.
Seems really good. All of these. So I play a Scroll Rack in my Lavinia Azorius Renegade deck, mostly because I'm running spells that. I guess it works well with the main win con, which is Approach of the Second Sun,
Sure.
so I can get it sooner. But sometimes you just have 4 lands in hand, and you're like, I need the next 4 cards. I can't have these 4 lands. I'm doing nothing.
Right.
So I agree. There's no exact or perfect replacement for these cards, but there's lots of options to manipulate the top of the deck. But this is one where there's just no exact replacement.
Yeah, and then a lot of people will run this card in conjunction with a Sensei's Divining Top. Sensei's Divining Top is actually climbing in price to a point where it's actually pretty close to the same price as a Scroll Rack. It might be like $5 to $10 cheaper. But Sensei's has seen at least 2 prints now. It has 2 different artworks, OG artwork. Go for the dreidel. It's the best one.
Does it also have a judge printing as well? Does it have 3 printings?
Yeah, I guess it would have 3 printings then. So,
I guess you shouldn't count the judge and actually flooding the pool or flooding the market.
There are some cases where the judge promo is cheaper than the real thing. So
let's talk about one where it's not then. So last week, my intro, I made a joke about being rich now because my Capture of Jin Shao card shot up. So let's talk about some extra turns. Capture Jin Shao is a sorcery that says pay 3 blue, take an extra turn. But it's from Portal, 3 Kingdoms, from real long ago. And the card is expensive. It is the lowest listing right now on TCG Player is about $190.
yeah.
But the Judge promo is listed at $300 now. So you can actually buy the older version for cheaper than the Judge version.
It's crazy.
Granted, yeah. I mean, if you want the older version, I mean, a lot of people want original printings. I mean, it's white border. That might be one reason why people desire the Judge promo. It's also foil. You can't get the old one in foil.
Right.
But this is a really expensive card. But this one actually has a one-to-one replacement. So you can actually just play Time Warp. Time Warp is 3 blue for target player takes an extra turn after this one. So this is actually just a reprint, and Time Warp has been printed a few times, and you can get it for as low as $10 now. So instead of spending just shy of $200 or $300, you can get it for about $10. But there's a lot of extra turn spells now. Granted, if you're playing an extra turn deck, you're probably aware of most of these because you're probably playing all of them. But you got extra turn spells in colors that aren't even just blue. You do have mono red take an extra turn, but it has a stipulation of you get an extra turn, but at the end of that turn you lose the game. You have a Boros extra turn that has the same stipulation. At the beginning of that turn's end step, you lose the game. You do have an extra turn in colorless, both Emrakul's, but I guess Emrakul, the Aeon's Torn is banned, so you can't play that. But Emrakul, the Promised End, does say that player takes an extra turn.
Sure.
But if you can steal the turn somehow, there's that. But I guess you've got a lot of cheap extra turn spells. Like Karn's Temporal Sundering is from Dominaria, so that set was printed a lot, but it costs 1 extra mana. So instead of 3 blue, it's 4 blue. And you have to have a legendary permanent to cast it because it's one of the legendary sorceries. That card you can buy for less than $1. There's a card from I believe it's Shadowmoor. Savor the Moment. You take an extra turn for 1 blue, but then you skip the untap step of that turn. Sometimes you don't need it. This only costs 3 mana.
Yeah, I actually do play that in my Super Friends deck because it's really good when you just get extra Planeswalker activations.
Oh, okay. And I mean, you can get this card for as cheap as $10 as well. Now, you do have Is It extra turns in both Stitch in Time and Rail Zarek, but both of those require you to successfully flip a coin and win your coin flip. Still, Stitch in Time is not an expensive card. You can get it for about a $1.80. It was reprinted in the Guilds of Ravnica guild kits. And then Rails Eric was just reprinted in Commander last year, and it was in Dragon's Maze. That you can buy a Rails Eric for about 85 cents. Granted, you have to plus him and then successfully ultimate it, but there are extra turn spells. You've also got a mono green extra turn spell that I think is underplayed. Seed Time, 1 and a green, instant. Play it only during your turn, and if an opponent cast a blue spell.
You get an extra turn?
Yes.
I've never even heard of this card before.
Really?
Yeah.
It's from Judgment. The cards, you can buy it for about $4.50. But yeah, a lot of people play blue. I see a lot of discussion online about how people want to, like, there's groups of people that want to play Commander, but no blues allowed for a game because you just don't want to get counterspelled. Well, I'd gladly welcome it if I was playing Seed Time, because you can counter my horribly awful spell that I know you're going to counter, and then I'm just going to play Seed Time then, and you won't hopefully have the counter for that, and I'll just take another turn, and you're out of your counter spell, and then I have all my mana back. So there's replacements for extra turn spells that are a lot cheaper than Captive Jin Shao. And again, they come with stipulations or excessively high mana cost. Beacon of Tomorrow's costs 8, but you shuffle it back into your library. Temporal Trespass costs 11, but it has Delve. Right. So if you don't care about the stuff in your graveyard, go ahead and take an extra turn.
Good. Okay. The next one I had is, I don't know if you have been paying attention out there, people, but during this whole quarantine time, actually a lot of older cards that are EDH staples are actually shooting up in price. As we saw with Andy's capture of the Jin Shao and my Imperial Seal. Some of these cards are just rocketing up in price. Another one of these cards that is continuing to go up in price is Wheel of Fortune. Wheel of Fortune, I think the cheapest you can pick one up for right now, our market price on TCG Player is $90, and I literally can't find one actually on sale right now. I don't know if my internet's down. Now we're looking at $120 to pick up a Wheel of Fortune, a revised Wheel of Fortune. Only up from there with its other printings in Alpha, Beta, and Judge Promo.
Judge Promo is at $650.
Yeah, it's pretty nuts. The cost of this card. So Wheel of Fortune, what does it do? Why are people paying so much money for it? 2 and a red. It's a sorcery. It says all players must discard their hands and draw 7 new cards. That's it. That's all it does.
It's really great. It's really great. Let me get rid of the crap I have and get something new.
So the real awesome part about it is it's technically card advantage in mono red. That's really, really, really the best part about it. It draws everyone back up to 7. Alternatively, some other wheels, but really it's a wheel. There are so many other wheels that are out there that you can play instead of Windfall. Windfall is not a necessary card in your deck. So if we are forced to stay in the red colors, what can we do about wheels? There is a miracle card that was printed a couple times. It was printed in Commander set, and I think it was printed in one other set, in Avacyn Restored. So Miracle says if it's the first card that you draw on your turn, you can cast it for its miracle cost rather than its regular cost. So Reforge the Soul is for 3 red. Each player discards his or her hand and draws 7 cards. Exact same effect. But the miracle cost is 1 and a red. So if you can somehow manipulate this card to the top of your library with, I don't know, like a Mystical Tutor or a Vampiric Tutor.
Scroll Rack.
You could use a bunch of all the other expensive cards to get this card back on top. But if you draw it, you can, it's absolutely one of the best top decks you can if you're empty-handed. Top deck, Reforge the Soul, 1 and a red, throw it down, get a brand new 7. I play Reforge the Soul in my wheel decks, even the ones that are super tuned, because sometimes you'll run into someone who does make you discard your entire hand, and it absolutely is one of the best top decks. So still staying in red, we have Winds of Change. Winds of Change only costs 1 red, but it says each player counts the cards in his or her hand, shuffles those cards into his or her deck, then draws that many cards. So you're not drawing back up to 7 in this case. Winds of Change you can pick up for, Reforge the Soul you can pick up for under $5. Winds of Change you can pick up for under $12 right now. It is actually seeing kind of an uptick right now. So the bad part about Winds of Change, if you are building around the wheel mechanic in terms of your opponent or you discarding cards, Winds of Change does not say you discard the cards. You shuffle them back in. You don't draw back up to 7. But this could actually be more beneficial. If you're holding 12 cards in hand and you cast a Winds of Change, you're going to draw back up to 12. Another red card, Incendiary Command. Incendiary Command was printed in a Commander 2013. You can pick one up for under $2 a copy right now. It was also printed in Lorwyn. It's for 3, a red and a red. Incendiary Command deals, you choose 2 effects. It either deals 4 damage to target player, deals 2 damage to each creature. You destroy a non-basic land, or each player discards all the cards in his or her hand, then draws that many cards. So again, you don't have the drawback up to 7, but this card is modal. So in a lot of ways, it's better than a Wheel of Fortune. It does cost 2 mana more, but you get to do a few other things. Wheel of Fate has been printed a lot. I'm not a huge fan of this card, but technically it is mono red and it does wheel. It has Suspend. So for 1 and a red, you put 4 Suspend counters, meaning it's going to take 4 turns until the actual spell goes off. Each player discards his or her hand, then draws 7 cards. If you have a way of casting a spell for free instead of its mana cost, this is a way to actually use Wheel of Fate as a Wheel of Fortune effect. And then finally in red, sticking in red, we have Magus of the Wheel. For 2 and a red, it is actually a creature, a 3/3 human wizard, that you can pay 1 and a red and tap it, and sacrifice Magus of the Wheel. Each player discards their hand, then draws 7 cards. So this obviously has huge drawback, seeing as if it doesn't have haste, you can't activate it the turn it comes out. It's 5 mana total in order to do it. But there are actually some benefits to it. You do have a 3/3 body in case you need a blocker. You can block and then activate it in response. It doesn't say you have to do it at sorcery speed. So you can do it at instant speed, really, if it has some sort of haste ability. And then reanimating a creature back to the battlefield is a lot easier than getting an instant or sorcery back to your hand. So in some ways, it can actually be better. Just a quick overview of some of the non-red cards you can play. You have Windfall you can pick up for under $2. It's 2 and a blue. Jace's Archivist you can pick up for under $2. Again, it's another creature, but this one you don't have to sacrifice when you activate it. Whirlpool Warrior you can pick up for under $2. This one has an ETB. You get a brand new hand and then sacrifice it. Everyone gets a brand new hand. Whispering Madness you can pick up for under $1. It has Cipher, so you can do it multiple times. It's in black and blue. Dark Deal, you can reduce people's hand size, and Teferi's Puzzle Box is a constant card draw. Dark Deal under $2, Teferi's Puzzle Box under $8.
Yeah, you have lots of wheel options. Like if you're playing a wheels deck and you don't have a Wheel of Fortune, don't worry, you're totally fine. That is completely unnecessary to have the Wheel of Fortune. If you have it, great, of course throw it in. But if you don't have it, it's not like you can't build your Jahzzar or the Locust God deck or whatever wheel deck you want to build. You're golden.
So many other options.
Now, while you're looking for your wheel cards, you might want to be able to, put them into your hand with the tutor, like Demonic Tutor or Vampiric Tutor, both of which are very expensive cards now. Even though Demonic Tutor has seen multiple reprintings, Vampiric Tutor has been reprinted. I wanted to focus on Demonic Tutor specifically, or tutors that can grab a card from your library and put it into your hand directly. So Demonic Tutor right now, you can find one for around $30. There's some that are just under. It depends on the printing. I think the cheapest one is the Demonic Tutor from the Dual Deck Divine vs. Demonic that was reprinted in, I believe it was Dual Deck Anthologies a couple of years ago. Yeah, so, and I like that artwork. It's Liliana with it's not Razaketh. It's the one from Amonkhet Black? No, it's not. That's Razaketh.
That would be Razaketh.
It's the one that
is it Kothafed?
It's Kothafed. Yes.
The one
yes.
the one that originally put the curse on Liliana.
Yes. Is that true?
Yeah.
No. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Ripped her skin off and it was real gruesome. I read the story, Magic Origins. It was crazy.
So if you want to be able to tutor for any card in your hand, there's lots of options. These come with really, for the most part, they come with higher CMCs, right? So Demonic Tutor is 1 and a black, search your library for a card, put it into your hand, shuffle your library. You don't have to reveal it, you just put it into your hand. So, one card that I play, and I think a lot of people play this, is Dark Petition. 3 black, so it costs 5, search your library for a card, put it into your hand. But then it also has Spell Mastery. If you have 2 or more instant or sorceries in your graveyard, you add black to your mana pool, so that's kind of cool. So you essentially played a Demonic Tutor if you had Spell Mastery, because you get the mana back then. I don't look at it that way, but you absolutely can.
Sure.
There's the stipulation that it's only a Demonic Tutor if you have instant or sorceries in your graveyard. Dark Petition costs $3. You can find that for real cheap. You could probably find it cheaper than that at one of your local game stores. Another card from Rivals of Ixalan is Mastermind's Acquisition. It actually only costs 4, 2 black, and it has 2 modes. So you can either search your library for a card and put it into your hand, or if you're playing not Commander, you could search your library or choose a card from outside the game and put it into your hand. That one never comes into play in Commander, but it costs 4. And you can find this card for $1.65.
I need to message a judge about Companion real quick with this card.
Okay. Oh, judges. So many questions with the Ikoria mechanics. Another card, many people might not know this exists, from Coyle's OG block, Razaketh's Right. 3 black, search your library for a card, put it into your hand, it's a sorcery. But it also has cycling for 1 black. So you might not need that tutor, so you can just cycle it away. You can find this for 40 cents. So you can exchange $29.50 for 3 extra mana. Is essentially what you're doing here. Again, like we said, this isn't an exhaustive list. There's a ton of tutors.
Yeah.
These are just the ones that we play most often. But I want to talk about a mechanic that a lot of people don't play that essentially is another tutor, and it's cheaper, but it has a restriction. So it's the mechanic Transmute.
Okay.
So you can pay a Transmute cost, you discard the cards, search your library for a card with the same CMC, and put it into your hand. So the stipulation here is that it has to be the same CMC of the printed card, but Transmute is usually significantly cheaper than what you would pay for these expensive tutors. So you have cards like Dimir Infiltrator it's a 2 CMC creature, but it has Transmute for 1 blue and a black. So you only have to pay 3 to do your tutor, but you can only grab a card with CMC 2. Right. So there is a restriction there. Dimir Houseguard is seen a lot in Commander. It costs 4, but it has Transmute 1 black. So for these Transmute costs, again, you discard the card after paying the Transmute cost and search your library for a spell with the same CMC. So looking right here, you've got a 1 CMC, a 2, there's 3, 2, there's a couple of 3s, a couple of 4s, a 5, and a 6, I see. So you can tutor for a lot, but Teleria West is also a land that you pay 3 to transmute, and you can transmute for a 0 CMC card.
Yep.
So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 9. There's a 9. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 9.
Yeah.
So the transmute costs are significant. The 9 CMC one only has transmute 3, but most of these have transmute for 3. Yeah, they're a combination of 1 black, 1 blue, or 1 blue, black. It was a Dimir mechanic from the Ravnica blocks, and then Future Sight had Teleria West, so understandably that's why it's in blue and black. But the tutors we talked about are all in black. There are tutors in other colors. Worldly tutor, those put cards at the top of your library, but it's a specific requirement. So white has Enlightened tutor, you can grab an artifact or an enchantment, correct? And then Worldly tutor's a creature. And those put it on top of the library, like the Vampiric tutor puts it on top of the library. But there are a lot of budget options, and I think these transmute cards are significantly underplayed.
Oh yeah. I mean, you have the added benefit of throwing creatures into your graveyard then too, if you're playing some sort of reanimation or Sir Conrad type of deal.
Well, and these all, I mean, Muddle the Mixture is a counter spell that has transmute. So I mean, sometimes you just want to use the counter spell. You know, Teleria West is still a land that taps for blue. So I don't think they're bad. I just think transmute's a little underplayed. So if you don't play transmute and tutor away this way, you should try it out. It's pretty great.
Muddle is actually played in CEDH a lot too. 2 CMC, finding your 2 CMC combo pieces is really good. Like, I don't know, Isochron Scepter you can go find, but you have a counter spell that you can save up just in case until whenever you need it.
Yeah.
That's
great.
Great.
Those are tutor options.
All right. Now, this next one. Personally, I am a glutton for this card.
Yes, you are.
I own lots of copies of this card, and I bought it when it wasn't this expensive. But I love this card. It's Cabal Coffers. Cabal Coffers is a land that was printed at Uncommon in Torment. And I think it was printed in a couple other... so it was printed in Torment. There's a promo, and it was printed in Planechase. This is Judge promo. So the cheapest copy you can find right now is about... it looks like you can get one for like $43.
Yeah, that's pricey. That's a pricey card.
It's a land. Produces mana sometimes. It doesn't always produce mana. So for 2 generic... You have to pay into it and tap it to add black to your mana pool for each swamp you control. So you really only want to play this in a swamp-heavy deck. Now, it doesn't say basic swamp. It does just say swamp, which is really nice if you play a card like Urborg, which is another land that costs, I think, about $20 right now, that turns all lands into swamps in addition to their other types. So... when I was looking at Cabal Coffers budget replacements, I was looking at cards that care about swamps in order to produce extra mana. So in Dominaria, they already basically reprinted this card in a budget version. They call it Cabal Stronghold. Cabal Stronghold, you can pick one up for under $3. It taps for a colorless, or you can pay 3 into it and tap it to add black for each basic swamp you control. So it does have that extra stipulation of a basic swamp. It does also cost 1 extra mana to pay into in order to tap it. However, it does have the added effect of tapping for a colorless, where Cabal Coffers does not tap for a colorless. It's just either you're tapping it for its ability or you're not tapping it. Another card that I like to play in a majority of my black decks to help with ramp is Cryptghast. Cryptghast is a 2/2 creature for 3 and a black with Extort, and honestly, Extort is just icing on top of the cake. But his main ability says whenever you tap a swamp for mana, add black to your mana pool. So you get an additional black every time you tap a swamp. Extort says whenever you cast a spell, you may pay a black or a white. If you do, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain that much life. Important to note that this text is actually part of a keyword. The keyword is just extort, so you don't actually have to follow the color identity of the extort activation, which is technically black and white. You can just play this in a mono black deck.
I would like more extort. I know that's not the point of this conversation, but
There's a good
let's
mechanic.
digress. Distort is so good in multiplayer formats.
Absolutely. And once we go back to Ravnica again,
oh please, yes,
we get some more Orzhov stuff going on. We can do that, I guess. As long as I get a Cryptcast reprint, that's fine with me. So Cryptcast does cost about $5. It's a solid staple, reprinted in Commander decks, and then obviously original printing was in Ravnica in Gatecrash. Nirkana Revenant does a very similar thing. It is 2 mana more expensive, so it's 4 black for a 4/4 Vampire Shades. Whenever you tap a swamp for mana and an additional black. It does have the added effect of pay a black, and it gets +1/+1 until end of turn, so it kind of self-synergizes. This did just see a reprint. So original printing was in Rise of the Eldrazi. It did see a reprint in Battle Bond, both at mythic level, so it did keep its price a little bit. You can pick one up for about $8 right now. It can be a win con if you have enough black mana, but really it's there to produce extra black mana. Hopefully you can reanimate it out so that it doesn't cost as much. We have actually, if you only need the mana on one turn, there is a sorcery called Bubbling Muck. Bubbling Muck costs 1 black, and it says until end of turn, whenever a player taps a swamp for mana, it produces an additional black. So if you're just looking to combo off once, Bubbling Muck, all your swamps now tap for double. Very similar to a High Tide would be for blue, where it says all islands tap for double. So Bubbling Muck can definitely make use. If you really, really just want to pump as much mana into it, you can cast a Rain of Filth immediately afterwards. A black instant says each land you control gains sacrifice this land, add black to your mana pool until end of turns. Sack all your lands. And then obviously a card that you can play in every single deck. You would particularly only want to play it in monocolor decks, but you could play it in more, is Caged Sun. Caged Sun is an artifact that costs 6 generic mana. This is when it enters the battlefield, choose a color. Creatures you control of the chosen color get +1/+1. Whenever a land's ability causes you to add 1 or more mana of the chosen color, add 1 additional mana of that color. So that actually helps you in that you don't actually need swamps to be tapping for black in order to get additional black. Caged Sun doesn't care if it is a swamp. It doesn't care if it's a basic. It just cares what mana type it's producing. You don't want to play this in Shirei, by the way, because it turns your 1-power creatures into 2-power creatures, and then they don't come back with Shirei. A lesson I learned the hard way. And then the last card, and kind of a segue in another subject I wanted to talk about, is Magus of the Coffers. So Magus of the Coffers, there's a series of cards that they printed called the Magus cards. Which are
Magi? Magi.
They are the Magi. Yeah, no, that's actually right. The Magi. Or Magi.
Magi?
Either one. They're both right. Depends what language you're speaking. I don't know which one's right in English. So we have Magus of the Coffers, which is basically a creature printing of Cabal Coffers, the same way that Magus of the Wheel was a creature printing of Wheel of Fortune. So for 4 and a black, you get a human wizard that's a 4/4. It says pay 2 and tap it. Add black to your mana pool for each swamp you control. You can pick up a Magus of the Coffers for under $4. Again, it's a way that you can have it on a creature and you can reanimate it. Hopefully you have a way to give it haste. It does have a body. It's actually a pretty good body too, 4/4. So they did print these series of cards called Magus cards. So there's the big ones that will, I guess, kind of save you money if you want to use them as direct replacements for the cards, are Magus of the Wheel for Wheel of Fortune, Magus of the Coffers for Cabal Coffers, Magus of the Candelabra for Candelabra of Tawanos, Magus of the Will for Yawgmoth's Will, Magus of the Moon for Blood Moon, which is actually going up in price right now. Magus of the Moon. There are red modern decks that want to play both. They need to moon out immediately. There's Magus of the Tabernacle, which Tabernacle I don't think is legal in EDH, but I believe Magus of the Tabernacle is legal in EDH.
I actually think Tabernacle at Pandro Vale is legal.
It is legal? I've never seen someone play it before.
Well, it's really expensive. Let me confirm. It is what? It is legal?
No, it's expensive.
Oh.
And while you're looking that up, the last one I had on this list was Magus of the Moat.
I love that card.
Because Moat is also an expensive card.
Moat is expensive, yes.
Also, I don't know if that one's legal in EDH either. But yeah, so they printed these Magus cards, or Magi cards, whatever you want to call them. They're human equivalents of these rather expensive cards that have activated abilities. Obviously, most of the cards they're printed after are not humans. They don't have summoning sickness, and all of the... When I say humans, I mean creatures. I don't know if they're actually all humans. Obviously, all the creatures have summoning sickness when they come in, so...
Tabernacle at Pendrevale is not banned in Commander.
Okay. Is Moat? Can you look that one up too?
I don't think Moat is either. No, Moat's not banned.
Okay. There are some other printings of Magi to replace some other expensive cards that I don't think are 1-to-1. So Magus of the Bazaar is also one where you tap it, discard 3 cards, draw 2 cards to replace Bazaar of Baghdad. There is Magus of the Library, which it must be Library of Alexandria, because I've never actually seen the Library of Alexandria, and it's definitely not Sylvan Library that it's replacing, because it just, you draw a card if you have 7. That's all it does, or it taps for
Library of Alexandria taps to add a colorless, or tap it, draw a card only if you have 7 or more in your hand.
Okay. So I guess that's kind of a pseudo reprint as well. One big downfall, I guess, to some of these are they do have a color, where a majority of these are actually kind of like lands. Like Coffers does have black as a color identity, but like Tabernacle Tabernacle has a color identity. Moat doesn't have a color identity.
Moat's white.
Bazaar of Baghdad doesn't have a color identity. That one I know.
Correct.
Yeah.
And the Magus of the library, correction, it does say you have to have exactly, not 7 or more. Exactly 7.
Yeah.
Yep. So.
And that one's in green.
Correct.
Yep. So just a quick aside there for the Magus cards. They're definitely budget versions that do pretty much, if not exactly, the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I play Magus of the Moat in my Azorius deck to make sure creatures aren't swinging at me. But the Magus cards are really good.
Yeah.
The next card that I have, the next, I guess, series of cards are fetch lands. You've heard of these. We've heard of these. They're expensive. They're not cheap. I mean, the ones that were reprinted in the Khans Black are they're creeping up into the 20s and 30s already. And there are some options, right? So you can search for dual lands, right, with these. So it says search for a forest or a plains or a swamp and a mountain, whatever it is, and you can grab your shock lands that come into play because they don't say basic land. They have the actual basic land types of forest or plains in the, I guess. Let's talk about the lands before I go too deep into that. The options, right? So I'm looking here at the slow fetches, which I don't think get enough credit. So if all you're doing is grabbing a basic, right? Because you can grab a basic. The speed is really irrelevant, right? Because if you were to play an Evolving Wilds, you have to wait till the next turn, whereas this one puts it onto the battlefield untapped. So these... if nothing, are good replacements for at least playing an Evolving Wilds or a Terramorphic Expanse. But these, like Grasslands, says it enters the battlefield tapped, and then you can sack it to search your library for a forest or a plains and put it onto the battlefield and then shuffle your library. So for this, it comes into play tapped now, but then on the next turn, you can have whatever land you grab come into play untapped, assuming you can meet whatever the conditions are. So this card specifically you can get for $1.30. Now there's a cycle. It's not a complete 10 card cycle yet, but you've got Grasslands for green white, Rocky Tar Pit for swamps and mountains, Bad River for islands and swamps, Floodplain for plains and and islands, and then Mountain Valley for mountains and forests. So the nice thing is that you can play these in a deck that doesn't, like you could play Mountain Valley, a mountain forest, in a red-white deck. The actual mana symbol for forest isn't on it, so you don't have to abide by the commander identity restrictions for these cards. So you can play multiples of these. Really great cards, really cheap options. All of them are actually Rocky Tar Pit you can get for 40 cents. Bad River you can get for $2. Floodplains for $1, and then Mountain Valley for $1.30. Actually, you can get it for a dollar from the actual Mirage printing. Really cheap. You're just sacrificing one turn essentially. If all you're going to do is grab a basic, then you're not actually losing out on time. It feels like it because it comes into play tapped now, but it's going to come into play tapped if you're grabbing a basic with the Evolving Wilds on that first turn. Mm-hmm. But these are really good options. You're going to save a lot of money with these, and I think that people value fetch lands perhaps a bit too high. If you're playing 3, 4, and 5 colors, they might feel necessary. Sure, you do need to make sure you get your colors, but if you're playing 2 color decks, the fetch lands are not necessary. No. They're just not. You're only playing 2 colors. If you're playing a lot of color heavy colors, or I guess cards with a lot of pips requiring those colors. So pips are the individual colored mana symbols on the printing of the CMC of the card. If you have a lot of those, sure, you might run into some issues, I guess, but in most cases you're not going to. So I play these. I also I play a lot of the manlands. I think manlands are also underrated. They come into play tapped, but those can turn into creatures. Mm-hmm. But you're not essentially, I guess. People talk about deck thinning. You're not really doing that here. In some cases, you want to shuffle your library. This still allows you to shuffle your library if you're using these slow fetches. And I see a lot of chat online. If you're playing casual games of Magic, these are perfect. Yeah. These are perfect replacements. And if you're looking to build a 5-color deck or a 4-color deck, these are great while you save up the money to get fetch lands, if that's the goal. But fetch lands are not necessary. So these are great replacements. I do play them, and a lot of these came in, I think it was the Commander 17. A lot of these were printed in Commander 18 and 17. At least Rocky Tar Pit Grasslands was as well. Let's see, dual decks, Venser and Koth for the Floodplain. Bad River has been printed in Mirage, and then Mountain Valley was in Commander 18 as well. So they're out there. I just don't think that they are played as much as they could be. Right.
Just a quick mention for 2-color decks, just as a reference. Scalding Tarn, which is the red-blue fetch, the cheapest you can pick up for right now is $69, just under $70. I'm pretty sure you could pick up about like 8, 9, 10 dual lands, like red-blue lands that would tap for either color that are going to do much more for your mana base than just that one fetch.
Yeah. Prioritize the lands that you need to upgrade your mana base. Don't go directly to the fetch land. Go to all your duels first.
Yep. All right. Next up, a card I've never owned, and I dream of owning it, and then I look at the price, and then I don't dream of owning it anymore. That's Gaia's Cradle. Gaia's Cradle it was printed in Urza's Saga, so very old, and it does have a Judge promo printing. Judge promo printing is going for as low as $899 right now. Where the Urza's Saga printing you can pick up for $390 on TCG Player. So for just under $400, you can pick up a Gaia's Cradle. Why is Gaia's Cradle so good? It is a legendary land that taps to add green to your mana pool for each creature you control. Okay, that's a really good effect. So a lot of decks that would produce a lot of tokens or put a bunch of creatures onto the battlefield that are low CMC. Typically, it's seen a lot in elf decks playing this, and it helps you ramp out, play large X spells or overrun type effects on creatures. So it is a very powerful card. It's definitely a remove on spot if you're ever going up against it. So some budget things you can replace. There's actually a card that Wizards obviously printed as an homage to it, or just a non-broken reprint version of it called Growing Rights of Itlimoc. Growing Rights is a legendary enchantment. Costs 2 and a green, printed in Ixalan. It does cost about $13 right now. So it's a little bit, it's maybe still out of some people's budgets. But when it enters the battlefield, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest in the bottom of your library in any order. And then at the beginning of your end step, if you control 4 or more creatures, you transform Growing Rights of Itlimoc, and you transform it into Itlimoc Cradle of the Sun. Yeah, if that's not an homage to Gaia's Cradle, I don't know what it is.
Right.
So that is a legendary land that either taps for a green or taps for a green for each creature you control. So it does have that added effect where it can just tap for a forest. Gaia's Cradle taps for nothing if you do not have a creature on the battlefield. So this has that small bit of upside. Obviously, it takes a lot more to get it on the battlefield because you have to transform your enchantment in order to get it. Dies to removal just as easily as the Gaia's Cradle, but it does have that little extra advantage when it enters the battlefield for you to search and get it. So if you search your top 4 and look for a creature. So if you do top deck this card late in the game versus top decking a Gaia's Cradle late in the game, this might actually be better for you. So that's like really the only functionally same card. However, there are some other options maybe you can play instead in its slot. So this is actually a little bit more expensive than the last option we talked about, but it is still very budget compared to Gaia's Cradle. And this is Nykthos Shrine to Nyx. This will cost you about $27 right now. You can tap it to add a colorless, or it's a legendary land. You tap to add a colorless, or you can pay 2 and tap it, choose a color, add to your mana pool an amount of mana of that color equal to your devotion to that color. So if you're playing a monocolor deck, which often when you are playing a Gaia's Cradle, you are playing a mono green deck, the creatures that you have out, the amount of pips that they have may actually exceed the amount of creatures that you have. So Nykthos might actually end up producing more mana for you than a Gaia's Cradle will. Now, if you're going the token strategy, that's not going to be the case since most tokens don't actually have a devotion unless they are a token copy of another card. Same thing can be said for Nyx Lotus, which is a new card that was printed in Theros, a legendary artifact for 4 generic. It does enter the battlefield tap, but then you tap it and choose a color, add an amount of mana of that color equal to your devotion to that color. So very similar effect. Now, if you want to go a little bit more streamlined, again, Gaia's Cradle is played in a lot of elf decks. There are a few elves that actually do very similar effects. Priest of Titania's, 1 and a green. You can tap it and add a green to your mana pool for each elf on the battlefield. That one you can get for about $3. Elvish Archdruid actually does the exact same thing for 1 green green. It's a 2/2. Also pumps your elves with +1/+1. You can get that for under $1. Wirewood Channeler taps to add X mana of any one color to your mana pool. So this one actually can add colors other than green, where X is the number of elves you have in play, and it's a 2/2 for 3 and a green that you can get for under $2. So if you're playing elves, you can play any of those or all of those instead of a Gaia's Cradle.
I also think one other card that's similar is that if you're playing a creature deck, you can play cards like Cryptolith, right? Because then your creatures tap for the mana on their own. So instead of tapping for each creature you have, each creature taps on its own. So it could be similar, right? But the creatures have to stay out.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I have a card that is not in its color anymore mechanically. So Sylvan Library is a really old card. And Sylvan Library is not a green mechanic, speaking color pie-wise.
Yeah.
So Sylvan Library is an enchantment for 1 and a green that says at the beginning of your draw step, you can draw 2 additional cards. If you do, choose 2 cards from your hand that you drew this turn. For each one, pay 4 life or put it on top of your library, right? So you're getting some card selection here. It's not typically a green mechanic, and you don't usually get that I guess you can get card advantage in green, but you don't get to get it this way anymore. Sylvan Library doesn't have a direct replacement, but there are a few cards that are cheaper. Sylvan Library being about $45 for the Eternal Masters printing. 5th edition you can get for about $40. Commander's Arsenal is about $55. So it's not a very cheap card, but there are cards that do things that are similar. So you could do if you're just looking for the card advantage portion, you could do Font of Mythos. At the beginning of each player's draw step, that player draws 2 additional cards, right? So you get to draw 2 extra, but so do your opponents. So you might not want to do that. That's colorless, so it can go into every deck that was playing Sylvan Library, and this is only you can get it from the Mystery Booster version. It was just reprinted in Mystery Boosters for like $3.50. So that's pretty cheap. If you're looking for specific card selection, there's 2 cards that I have. One came out in 2017. Commander 2017 was a reprint. It's from Urza Saga. It's been printed a few times. The card Abundance. So 2 green. If you draw a card, instead choose land or non-land, and you reveal from the top of your library until you reveal a card of the chosen kind, and you can put that card into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library. So if you're just trying to make sure you don't draw a land, and that's the purpose of playing the Sylvan Library, this card will prevent you from doing that or help you to achieve that goal. This card is about $1. I mean, there's some listed at $1 from Dual Decks Nissa versus Ob Nixilis, so really cheap. But the other card that I found that I really like, and I hadn't seen it until I did this research, was a card called Preferred Selection from Mirage. So it's 2 green. It's an enchantment that says at the beginning of your upkeep, you can look at the top 2 cards of your library. You may sacrifice Preferred Selection and pay 2 green. If you do, put one of those into your hand. If you don't pay, put one of those cards on the bottom of your library. So you can at least filter 2 cards on the top of your library in green. So not something you see very often. I guess we had it in green-black. There was there was a Sultai card where you could put a card into your graveyard. I can't remember it exactly, but Preferred Selection feels similar. You don't get the card advantage, but if your goal is just to have the selection, you can absolutely do it. You can do it this way. And this card is less than $1 from Mirage. So
that was Sultai Ascendancy you were talking about.
Is it Sultai Ascendancy? Does that
at the beginning of your upkeep, look at the top 2 cards of your library, put any number of them into your graveyard, and the rest on the top of your library in any order.
Oh, I'm so glad I remembered that. So you can do that as well. This feels very much like that, but this is in mono green. So if your goal is to just make sure that you have the right color, this only costs 1 specific color of mana, not 3. So this is probably preferred, I guess, in my opinion,
yep.
over the Sultai Ascendancy. But yeah, I really like this card. So if you're looking to try to find a cheaper version of Sylvan Library or to achieve the same type of effect, those are some options.
Absolutely. Quick note, thing I always like talking about with Sylvan Library is you actually do draw all 3 of those cards and then put 2 of them back. If you use any sort of replacement effect for those card draws, if you do a replacement effect for all 3, you don't have the ability to put any of them back down that you drew, so you don't have to pay any life, and you just get, like, if you dredge 3 times, you don't have to pay any life. You just dredge 3 times.
Wonderful.
Okay. So very coincidentally, you're talking about a mono green card that has non-mono green type effects. My last card is also a mono green card with non-mono green type effects. Concordant Crossroads.
Haste.
It's an Enchant Worlds card. So it's an enchantment. It was printed in Chronicles, and then was also printed in Legends. So if you want black border, you're going to have to pick up the Legends version for as low as $62. If you don't care about that and you're fine with a white border card, like I would be, you can get it the Chronicles version for as low as $30. So what Concordant Crossroads is, it is a 1 green enchantment that says creatures can attack or use abilities that include tap in the activation costs as soon as they come into play on their controller's side. So it is a world effect. It's not just for you. And essentially it gives all creatures haste. I don't know if it actually grants the keyword haste. I'm looking it up in Gatherer right now. All creatures have haste. Yes. Okay. It actually gives all creatures haste. So, if you're
so they can all block Gingerbrute.
They can all block Gingerbrute. Exactly. So there is, from my my research, there's absolutely 0 cards that you can replace with Concordant Crossroads in mono green to give all creatures haste. So I'm sorry. But there are some cards you can play if you expand outside of the green color, or if you're only looking at a specific ability or a specific creature. So first we're going to talk about Anger. Anger is for 3 and a red. It's a 2/2 incarnation creature with haste. It says as long as Anger is in your graveyard and you control a mountain, creatures you control have haste. You can get a copy of Anger for under $2. It's been reprinted quite a few times, actually. I assume it'll continue to see reprints in Commander sets in the future. So you do have to control a mountain. This is mono red. Obviously, red is all about haste. But this is haste only for your creatures, so you actually have that added extra benefit. It technically doesn't cost any mana. As long as it's in your graveyard and you control a mountain, your creature's got haste. Another mono red card is Urabrask, the Hidden.
Underplayed card.
Very much so. So for 3 red, you get a 4/4 legendary creature Praetor. It says creatures you control have haste. Creatures your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. So this card you can pick up for under $7. It's been reprinted once. It's reprinted once, so it has 2 printings. So yeah, again, another mono red. It is a creature that you do have to have on the board, so you do have to invest a little bit more. It is a little bit easier to remove, but it has the added effect of being a 4/4 body, and your opponent's creatures come into the battlefield tapped. Just slightly expanding on the green pie, if we go green and red, we have actually one of my favorite enchantments that they printed in Ravnica Allegiance that they just had the set come out. It's called Rhythm of the Wild. So for 1, a red and a green, you get an enchantment that says creature spells you control can't be countered, and non-token creatures you control have Riot, meaning when they enter the battlefield, you have the choice of either putting a +1/+1 counter on them or granting that creature haste. So this has the added benefit if the creature comes into play and it already has haste, you could throw a +1/+1 counter on it, and creature spells you control can't be countered. This is hella good, I would say. That's the category to put it in. You can pick up
good.
It's an uncommon, again, from a very recent set. It's still legal in standard, so you can pick it up for under $2 a card. So in the event that the reason you want to give your creatures haste is not so that they can swing, but so that their abilities can activate, there is an artifact you can play called 1,000-Year Elixir. It costs 3 generic mana. It says you may activate abilities of creatures you control as though those creatures had haste. So again, if you just put out a bunch of mana dorks that can tap for mana, they'll tap as if they had haste, or an activated ability like Prime Speaker Vanifer to sacrifice a creature and look for another. You're giving it haste. Also has the added ability where you can pay 1 and tap it to untap target creature, so you can do some shenanigans with that ability. It is an artifact, so you can play it outside of mono green as well. Individually, there are some cards that give single creatures haste in artifact or in colorless that you can play if that's really what you're looking for. Swiftfoot Boots. You can get for under $3 a card. Pay 2, equip for 1. Equip creature as hexproof and haste. Lightning Greaves you can get for under $6. It costs 2 to put out. Equip for 0. Equip creature as haste and shroud. And then Hall of the Bandit Lord, one of the utility lands we talked about a week ago. It is a land that enters the battlefield tapped, but then when it's untapped, you can pay 3 and tap it to add a generic to your mana pool. If the mana is spent on a creature spell, that creature gains haste. This card is a little bit more expensive. You can pick one up for under $14.
Do you wanna get all your cards bounced from a Cyclonic Rift? Because no one else does. So why don't we do it together? So instead of bouncing just your opponent's cards, we'll bounce all the permanents, including the ones we have. So Cyclonic Rift, it's played, it's loved, it's hated, it's got a love-hate relationship. Lots of people love it. I actually don't hate it. When it's played on me, it's like, well, I kind of expected it, right? But for 7 CMC, because people don't remember that it is also a 2 CMC card. Mm-hmm. It's not just 7. I play it for the 2 all the time. Yeah. So individual bounce. But most people view it as a 7 CMC card that bounces all of your opponent's non-land permanents. It's $30. I'm sorry, it's $35 now. It's just an expensive card. But we have some replacements. But what you're giving up is that you're bouncing your own stuff. Many situations when you're playing these types of cards, you don't really care because you're probably not committing very much to the board. So some cards that are very good replacements are cards like Flood of Tears, which came out in Core Set 2020, which is 87 cents for 4 blue. So actually 1 cheaper than a Cyclonic Rift overloaded. But Sorcery Speed says return all non-land permanents to their owner's hands. But it has, if you return 4 or more non-token permanents you control this way, you can put a permanent back from your hand onto the battlefield. So this was a combo in Standard with Omniscience. It's also happened in Commander. You throw out your Omniscience after you Flood of Tears. So really, really strong card and costs next to nothing. Devastation Tide. Coyle talked about a miracle card earlier, Reforge the Soul. This is also a miracle card. If it's the first card you drew this turn, you can pay a cheaper CMC for it. But Devastation Tide costs 3 blue, and you return all non-land permanents to their owner's hands with miracle cost of 1 and a blue. So if it's the first card you draw, you can pay it for 1 and a blue. You don't have to pay it. You have to show that it was the first card you drew that turn. But 5 CMC is still fine, but again, Sorcery Speed, and you're bouncing everything. There's a specific Commander printed card called Coastal Breach, came out in Commander 16. I also think this card is underplayed. It costs 7, 6 generic and a blue, but it has Undaunted, so it costs 1 generic less for each opponent you have. So if you've got 3 opponents, you're only paying 4 for this. You return all non-land permanents to their owner's hands at Sorcery Speed. This card's about $3. So if you don't mind bouncing your own stuff, you have a replacements for Cyclonic Rift. There's lots of cards that'll bounce things. If you're looking for individual bounce, there's a ton of those, and they cost mere cents. But if you're looking to bounce the entire board, you've got a few options here, and they're all really cheap. So you don't have to spend all that money on a Cyclonic Rift. And then if you play with a bunch of people that already despise Cyclonic Rift, then you can say you're not playing Cyclonic Rift.
And then get them good with all these other cards.
And then get them really good with a Flood of Tears. And then you lay your Omniscience, and then everybody just groans.
Yeah.
I've never done it. To be fair, I've never done that in Commander, but I played that combo deck in Standard with the Risen Reef and the drawing the cards, and yes. So good. And the Tameo. Tameo bringing it back. And,
Thought erasure me now.
Oh, yeah, right. So these are just a few. We like Coyle said, we had somebody talk about this. This was fun actually, and there's a lot more cards that we could go over. We didn't have a specific range, like price range, like the card must be this many dollars or more for it to hit this list. We didn't do that this time, but we could probably do a version of this where we chose like cards that are $10 and we need to find something cheaper. But this was really fun, and there's a lot of substitutions that you can make in Commander with all these cards, and a lot that I didn't know about until just today, until just this week, I guess, when I was doing a lot of the research for like the replacements for Sylvan Library. Didn't know those cards exist. I mean, Abundance, obviously, because I bought a pre-con, but I did not know all of them. So, yeah, interesting stuff here. So save some money. We hope you do, because it's expansive. This game's expansive.
It's an expensive game.
It's an expansive game. You want to go over your Commander of the Week? Hogaak, Arisen Necropolis, which, by the way, is the funniest deck name. When you sent me the list, because it's on the YouTube video, I was dying. Was it called Hog Nasty or Hog Daddy?
So so I call him the Hog Daddy, and because the deck's name is going Hog Wild Nasty. So Hogaak, Arisen Necropolis, the Murderer of Modern, is a 5 hybrid Golgari, legendary creature avatar. He's an 8/8 with trample. However, you can't spend mana to cast this spell.
No.
But he has Convoke and Delve. meaning you can tap creatures for mana. The creature, if they have a color identity, can tap for that color. And then delve, meaning you can exile cards from your graveyard to pay for a generic mana cost for him. And then you can also cast Hogaak from your graveyard. So what this deck wants to do, it has a Lands Matter sub-themes and a Reanimator sub-theme. So the idea is to fill the graveyard up, either reanimate the creatures back, use the cards in there that aren't creatures that we're not going to reanimate back in order to cast Hogaak. Our Lands Matter abilities are going to help us create a bunch of tokens that are going to help us get Hogaak on the battlefield. And then through pure value is how we're going to try to win this game, swinging at people with huge things. There is one infinite combo in the deck that can close out the game if need be. I don't actually run tutors in the deck, so there's no way for me to just go search it out. However, my card draw engines in here are pretty good, such as like Villas, Broker of Blood, a fan favorite, and by a fan I mean me, a favorite of me, in order to draw a bunch of stuff. And then obviously I had to put Worm Coil engine in here as well. Because
for namesake, because that's me.
So I do only run 3 pieces of artifact ramp, being Golgari Signet, Soul Ring, and Talisman of Resilience. So because of that, I'm running 38 lands. I am running every worthwhile and legal fetch land besides the newest fetch land from
Fabled Passage.
Yeah, I'm not running Fabled Passage simply because I don't own one. So we're going to have some Lands Matter payoffs, such as Avenger of Zendikar, which enters the battlefield. You get a plant token for each land you control, and then whenever a land enters the battlefield, you put a +1/+1 counter on each land. We have Lotus Cobra in here, so whenever a land enters the battlefield, we can add 1 mana of any color to our mana pool, so that also makes up for the lack of artifacts. When we go over to the how to fill the graveyard up, we have a lot of dredge cards that we're going to play. So dredge means if you were to draw a card, you can instead return this card from your graveyard to your hand and take a number of cards from the top of your library and put it in your graveyard equal to the dredge cost. So we have cards like Stinkweed Imp with dredge 5, and we have Golgari Grave Troll with dredge 6, as well as a few other cards. We have Hermit Druid in order to fill up our graveyard. So 1 and a green, you get a 1/1 Druid. You could pay a green, tap it, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a basic land. Put that card into your hand. Put all other cards revealed this way into your graveyard. Typically, when you're playing this card, like in a competitive scene, you'll play like no basics and then mill your entire deck. We're playing 13 basics in this, so we are hopefully going to mill a big chunk of our deck, but not all of it. We play Ulamog, the Infinite Gyre, in here just to reshuffle our graveyard if we need to. Seer Comrade, the Grim, is super, super good in this deck. So whenever another creature dies or a creature card is put into a graveyard from anywhere other than the battlefield, or a creature card leaves your graveyard, Seer Comrade the Grim deals 1 damage to each opponent. So not only does this synergize with milling ourselves to put creatures in our graveyard, reanimating creatures when creatures leave our graveyard, but it also helps if we delve those creatures away in order to cast Hogaak. They are leaving our graveyard, thus they do damage. Some huge payoffs we have, like Lord of Extinction, whose power and toughness equal to the number of cards in all graveyards, so it can be really huge towards the end of the game. Sheoldred Whispering One, making other people sacrifice their stuff, and you reanimating your stuff at the beginning of every upkeep. Splendid Reclamation to return all the lands from our graveyard to the battlefield, and we get tons of triggers that way. But really, the infinite combo that hopefully we will pull off if the game is going on for too long is Phyrexian Altar and Karazda Guildmage. So Karazda Guildmage is a black and a green elf shaman 2/2 that says, yeah, you can pay 1 a black and a green, target creature gets +1/+1 and gains Intimidate until end of turn, or you can pay 2 a black and a green, sacrifice a non-token creature to create X 1/1 green sapperling creature tokens, where X is the sacrificed creature's toughness. So the idea is we're going to sacrifice Hogaak in order to get 8 tokens. We're going to tap 7 of those tokens to recast Hogaak from our graveyard, and then we can sacrifice 4 of those tokens with Phyrexian Altar to reactivate Karazda Guildmage to sacrifice Hogaak, repeating the process until we have so many tokens and so much mana we don't know what to do with. Just kidding. We do know what to do with it. Exsanguinate for 100.
Just kidding.
So that's basically the deck. Specifics you can see in the deck list that we'll post. Bunch of reanimation spells is what you're going to see.
Yeah, and you can see it play out also, like we said earlier, on YouTube. So check that out. We'll post a link to that video as well. And that's a very strong deck, and one that is very resilient until someone hits it with a Bojuka Bug.
Yeah, Bojuka Bug, Leyline of the Void, whatever it takes, it happens.
Yeah, it does happen.
Oh.
Well, thank you all for listening. If you want to contact us, you can find us on Twitter at GuardianPod. You can find me directly at ATFlurry.
You can find me at Wormcoil Engine.
And you can look for hashtag Guardian Project Pod to find our posts and episodes. You can also email us at guardianprojectpod@gmail.com. And if you're on Discord and you're interested in joining the discussion, send us a message and you can jump into our server. It's been a lot of fun. A lot of people are setting up games to play Commander while we're all at home. So we hope you come and hang out with us, and we will be back next week. See you guys later.
Bye-bye.
See ya.
Couldn't stop talking.
I need to pick up some more of these cards, honestly.
Yeah. I was surprised you didn't mention Wishclaw Talisman in the tutor section, because I know you play that in Lysolda.
I actually do. You're right. Just didn't come to mind when I was. There were so many options.
You stole tutors from me, Andy. You stole the tutors from me.